Okay, just like to welcome everyone to another Film Roundtable. My name is Matthew Woolf, and I'm very excited to introduce our two panelists today. Before I introduce them, though, and get started on the conversation, I just want to lead us through what we normally do on Film Roundtable as a moment of silence to honor, as of today, which is Sunday, October the 3rd, the 4,801,111 reported worldwide COVID deaths. We'd also like to honor all of our Black and Brown brothers and sisters, as well as our First Nations brothers and sisters whose lives have been taken by the hands of police brutality and other senseless acts of violence. So please join me in a moment of silence. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. I think at Film Roundtable, we think it's important to kind of keep track of everything going on in this world, even as we go back to work. Many of us are going back to work and our lives are returning to some kind of normalcy. You know, for many people, that's still a long way away. And that's why we want to kind of remember, you know, what's going on in the world right now. So thank you for joining us for that. Now back to the conversation in hand, and I'm very excited. We're all very excited at the Film Roundtable to introduce you to Kasra Farahani and Durald Arkapaw, who are the production designer and director of photography on the Disney series Loki. Welcome today, guys.
Thanks for having us.
It's been a while trying to get you guys together, trying to get us together to make this happen. But thanks for bearing with all the hurdles. So I wanted to start off. Obviously, I'm going to let you guys riff about, you know, as much as possible, as I understand it. You've both done many interviews separately, but not one together. So it's going to be a joining of two great forces, and so we're all excited to see where that leads. I'm going to try and back off as much as I can, and let you guys riff. But I guess I wanted to start by asking you both, and I'm not 100% sure, but I'm fairly certain this was probably both your first Marvel experience. Is that correct? Well, as a production designer, as a production designer, though, right?
Kasra? Yes, as a department head, yes. That's for me. Yes, it was for sure.
Right, and obviously you, Autumn, as a director of photography or cinematographer, and so you know, I'd like to know what that was like, and how does it differ from any other show or movie that you guys have worked on before? You know, is there more pressure knowing that there's going to be more scrutiny from such a large fan base as there is, you know, in the Marvel universe?
I'll let Kasra answer that one
first. You know, I don't think so. I mean, I think that there's pressure to deliver something excellent looking and extraordinary and creative, but I don't think that it's necessarily more so because of the fan expectations. I feel like by the time Autumn and I show up, there's a lot of people there that have kind of gone through the canon of the Marvel world, basically, and distilled the relevant pieces into the script that we're working from. So I feel like others are more responsible if the fans don't like what's been selected for us to depict. I mean, certainly, like Autumn and I are responsible for what the thing ends up looking like, but in terms of, or we're among many people, we're responsible for what it ends up looking like. But in terms of like the stuff that I think really gets can tick off fans, that's sort of above our pay grade, I think.
Yeah, I mean, exactly what he said. But then also I felt like because he had worked in Marvel before Kasra had, and so he has the experience of the machine a bit, and you know, is experienced in kind of that process, which is very unique now that I know about it. But I really felt like because it was my first project and I came on, and then I'm getting, you know, Kate's like, this is what I want to do. And then she shows me Kasra's pitch. And then I go into his office and he has all this stuff on the wall. And it's like, oh, this actually looks really good. I was like, wow, okay, so we're making something that looks good and you know, it's going to be cool and like different. So that kind of realization happened to me. Like in the interview, it happens because people, you know, show you their lookbooks and you're like, okay. And then you sign on and then you actually go in the office and you're like, this is what the designer and the director are kind of, you know, driving towards, and then you get excited. So for me, it was about that. I think it's like the people above me or that came before me were like trying to like knock it out the park. So it's like, oh, okay, so now I have to, okay, this is good, you know. But yeah, I just kind of followed suit because, you know, the structure was there for me to riff off of. But yeah, he would clue me in, Kasra would clue me into like stuff I didn't know about because he obviously is designing for the story and what came before it. So I kind of leaned on him and Kate when it came to that kind of stuff because I'm not so versed in Marvel, more now than before, but yeah.
Yeah, but I think Autumn's totally right in that, like, that was I think a really important distinction, because I have worked on a few different Marvel projects, albeit in different capacities. I do feel like this one felt very different in the way that Autumn described, in that because it wasn't, because this story was sort of happening in like a new world for the Marvel universe. We didn't have as much stuff that we were beholden to in terms of pre-existing visual styles that we were beholden to. So like she described, that was really exciting. And I think that, you know, Kate and Kevin Wright, our creative producer, like part of the team they were putting together, including Autumn and myself, like I think reflects maybe by design, they wanted something that was going to feel different visually than all the other Marvel stuff. I mean, obviously you look at like Autumn's work, which is singular and so distinct. It's obviously a choice when you pick Autumn to come and like blow up that world of precedent in terms of photography in the Marvel world with something innovative and really dramatic, like what our Marvel or what Autumn brings to Marvel. I think is a big was a great kind of early on indicator of how bold they were open for us to go visually, basically.
Something you said before, because there's a couple of things you both said that made me think of some questions. But let me start with you, Autumn. How much, you know, Kasra just said your style, was obviously on show here during the show. I mean, how much do you think of yourself as bringing a style, or, you know, did you adapt your style to the show?
Sure.
Because, you know, obviously I think, you know, I can speak from a cinematographer's standpoint. You know, I feel like we want to be malleable when we go to different projects. Yeah. But often people like to pigeonhole us in certain styles of films and projects that we tend to get. I'm sure it's probably the same as a production designer. So, you know, and we obviously always are striving to test our creativity and push those boundaries to do something different. You know, how much of, you know, were you both tested, and did you manage to bring something new, not just for the show, but for yourselves?
Mm-hmm. Do you want to go first, Autumn?
Yeah, well, I was gonna say it's easy. It's interesting because I guess that's a question you could get asked on any project, because I've definitely gotten pigeonholed, and I'm sure Kasra has his own story with, like, you know, coming of age stuff, because that was kind of my first project that came out. But it really is so important and I see this now, like if you bring the right people together, because then your taste and your style gets highlighted. And it just happened to be that, and I remember Kate saying this in the interview, I think it was my first day back, and she kept hinting, she's like, you love Kasra. I can't wait for you to meet him. You're gonna get along with him great. Like she already knew that, like in her choice. And that's so huge because I don't know many directors actually necessarily think to do that or think that they're doing it on purpose. But when it works out, I'm gonna shine because him and I's taste align. And I'm not answering this because he's just here, but it is true that I'm supporting his taste, he's supporting my taste, and they align in the same kind of fashion. But I was able to be free with my stuff and kind of visually, take risks because Kate was on board, but also he was designing stuff that was in line with what I would already do. It's like I'm getting his illustrations and I'm like, and obviously in his illustrations, he, puts light sources in there or quality of light comes before me. And I'm like, that looks amazing. I would do that anyways. Or like, obviously on set, I'll try and replicate that because it's already there. So I was already allowed to kind of bring that to the table because of the people I was being coupled with. So yeah, I did feel like I could be free, and I felt like same for him, like he was allowed to express his, artistry, and he's so talented in his design that we never really had issues, where it's like, oh, I'm trying to do this and I can't do it, or we don't, have the same taste.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that this was, I think this happens once in a while, but it's not super common that like there was a definite visual synchronicity between what I think is a visually a priority for me and visually a priority for Autumn. And the other thing I'll add to that is like also the source material that we're working with happen to have those kind of opportunities because, like not every script has a lot of visual opportunities, full stop. But other times they may have visual opportunities, but they're not necessarily going to sync up with one or both person's taste. And like this really did in so many ways, like the aesthetic of authoritarianism and bureaucracy and but with like with a strangeness, this combination of awe and oppression and tiny elements of humor. It's just like it's in my wheelhouse. It's the stuff I like to design in terms of I like to design a degree of kind of architecturally forward designs. And that are very much built around integrated lighting and have a lot of kind of sculptural architectural elements. And Autumn's style is naturally this beautiful, low, wide coverage that like dovetails perfectly into what I thought was the best approach to the material and what the material was clearly, I think, kind of asking for. So I think, to answer your question, like, yeah, definitely, I think I have a point of view, if not a style, and you're right that you try to let the source material, to a degree at least, inform what the style is, obviously to a great degree, but hopefully, you have something to say, which is why you're on this job. But in this unique circumstance, there was this kind of perfect alignment of these things that I think is why the show looks like it looks and why, we've been lucky enough to get the reaction we've had to it.
Yeah.
I mean, for sure. There's when we first spoke a few months ago about doing the talk, you were only 3 episodes in to the shows that had been aired so far. And since then, the reaction was already great. But since then, some of the reviews I've read online and saying that a lot of people say this is the best Marvel experience, in so many levels. That must be a huge compliment, for you guys, obviously. But part of that, I think, is due to you guys, as well as the performances and the direction, the whole ensemble. But the fact that it seemed, you, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that most of what you shot was practical, as opposed to set extensions. And the fact that you use your low wide angles to include the ceilings, and and how impressive they were. I mean, that was one of the first things that from the very first episode that jumped out to me as a cinematographer. And I just shot a project, a short film project, and the director, as one of the references, said, "I'd really love these, like this look as a reference." And I said, "Oh, great, what is it?" And he sent me this image, and it was the image of Owen Wilson, and I can't think of the actress' name. She was playing the guy that originally, the officer that originally captured Loki. They're standing in that wide office, the TVA, for the first time. You're looking up at the two of them, and you see this incredible vaulted ceiling with all the lights, and it's so impressive because it's so natural, yet at the same time so cinematic. Now I know you probably talked about this a bunch, about how you managed to do this, but I think what I'm interested in is something you touched upon in our previous conversation, is that how working together as the team managed to make that possible, whereas perhaps had you not been who you both are, that might not have happened. So I'm interested to hear about that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it sort of dovetails to the thing we were just talking about in the last question. It was like, basically because of my visual priorities and Autumn's visual priorities were so synced. It's why we were able to advocate for building 360-degree sets a lot of the time with intact ceilings with integrated lighting. Was because it's an expensive and enterprise to do that, but if I can convince the writers to put enough scenes into the space, and Autumn plans to shoot in a way that you see the thing, well, then it makes good financial sense on top of making very good narrative and visual sense as well, especially in a story like ours, which is so much about the tactility of this space, this like lived in kind of grungy authoritarian patina that contrasts the grand scale of the architecture. Is like you're just not going to get that kind of gritty texture if you don't have a big chunk of the set there. It's going to be harder for Autumn to haze it the way she wants if there's a blue screen behind 2/3 of the frame that they have to replace. And so it was just, both of us wanting that, I think, made that argument so much stronger.
Yeah, and it's cool to have done that and see the results pay forward, because sometimes I guess you can fight for stuff and then you do it and you don't really get that feedback, that like, oh wow, this was important, to speak up. And Kasra and Kate spoke up about it and involved me in it, but it's thoughtful filmmaking. I don't know how else to put it, but when you have people that are being thoughtful about everybody's department in a sense, not just their own, he's thinking about the space as far as, just how it's shot and how it's lit. And, Kate comes from a place where she has these bold references that she's really into, and, darker cinema and, noir, and she's open to these ideas, right? She's chosen filmmakers to support her that she's allowing to kind of, flex their thoughts and their ideas and not put up a barrier about things. So it was really nice to just be in that environment with everybody. But yeah, I mean, it was something that was asked for that I think, Kasra and Kate kind of were like, okay, this isn't something we're going to automatically get, and then we had to talk about it. And obviously I'm on board, and it was great. But it's nice to see that everybody like that, because architecturally, like if you're given these spaces as a DP, and this, Matt, I mean, we light them, but you have to have something amazing to light to, in general. So that's really, it's such a big part of it. So.
Yeah. And I'll add to that it wasn't a for sure thing that we were going to win that fight. It was dicey for a while, and
you would know more than I.
It was tense at times, and because it's a big investment, understandably should be scrutinized. But like Autumn said, it was a big relief that it paid off as well as it did, because we had to hard sell it, and it really was just me and Autumn and Kate and Kevin, our producer. It was the four of us like really pushing for it. That was the only way it got through. So we all kind of had our neck on the line. So it's great for all of us that it was the right choice and paid off.
Yeah,
that's funny. That leads me to one of my other questions. It ties in nicely. I mean, obviously, with that responsibility on your shoulders after you guys have done such a hard sell, were there any moments during the production where you had like, oh shit moments, like we're in way over our head here? It's like, oh God, what have we done? Or God, it's like, because obviously, obviously, we've all done projects of varying sizes, but you try to step up, when you can, and there's constant challenges, hopefully, that you haven't faced before. So, I'm wondering, whether you had any of those moments. And before you answer, the reason I ask that is because often people don't ask those difficult questions, and I think it's important for young up and comers to kind of hear any kind of difficulties or problems, if you can remember any. So
I'll let Kasra answer that one. I mean, I will say one thing. I did notice this. I mean, because things are coming his way before that they're coming to me, right? He's designing the space, he's reading the script. He has to come up with stuff. If someone's thinking about you before it gets to you, that's a huge weight off your shoulders. Like, I'm not like there was not one time where Kasra was like, "Here's a turd, make something out of it," which I've had in the past. It's like on lower budgets, or it's hard, right? Because people are backs against the wall and you have to come up with stuff. But I'll let him speak about that, because I never felt like I was it was a time thing to shoot, right? Like, how do we shoot this in the amount of time? And if we did have blue screen, right, Kaz, it was like, like, how do we kind of, we're so much about making something feel real and look real that him and I were like, how do we do that? But he probably has a better answer, because he helped me.
No, I think you're right. I think definitely the trickiest stuff were the times where we were relying on set extension, which we tried to minimize, but inevitably when you have a show that takes place in so many different places and space and in other dimensions, like, you have a degree of that. And I think that was always the trickiest things to plan, and it took a lot of collaboration with Autumn and I and the VFX department to get out in front of it, because when we're building the sets that are mostly practical, what Autumn and I can control so much more of it in camera. So I think that's true. And I think the other thing, the kind of, oh shit, or if I read between the lines, maybe what that means is like things deviating from what's anticipated. The kind of inherent bucking bronco of production, especially, which is, it's inherent to production, especially when you're dealing with something that's, episodic, but has this feature ambition to it. And especially when you're in our situation where you're starting and you don't have 6 scripts, you've got 2 scripts, but you're budgeting and scheduling and planning how many sound stages you need, what's on location and what's on a stage, and in what order are you flipping sets. So like, you're doing that with pretty incomplete information. So, and then you add to that the variable of COVID and shutting down for 6 months. So inevitably that introduces this sort of, oh shit thing where you're like, COVID happens, and then things that were going to be a location are now going to be stage sets. And they weren't anticipated for that. They weren't visually conceived of for the kind of confines of a stage. So like The Void was originally going to be, part of it was going to be on location and part of it was going to be a backlot. But it just didn't end up working that way. And I think it ended up being fine, but it was one of those things where it was like a lot of game time decisions for a little while till we worked out the logistics of that pivot. Similarly, there are sets, this is, particularly the case for the scripts that are later, the later episodes, where, you think something's happening because you're working from an outline and they've got certain scenes that are supposed to happen there. and you design or plan around what that action is, and the script is in constant flux, not constant flux, but it evolves. So there's a few times that didn't happen a lot, but there's a few times where comes time to shoot it, and what you've designed and built is maybe more set than you need, and other times it's not enough set, because the page counts are fluctuating in those spaces. So to the degree you can, when you see that coming, you try to like curtail the scope if your page count's lower than you thought, and you try to add to the scope if the page count's higher than you thought, but within the bounds of what you can do, considering the horse has left the barn already, like stage space is allocated, construction documentation is done, lighting and rigging has been planned. So those are the sorts of things that are I think just part of the deal, especially on larger productions. COVID probably exacerbated it a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, there's did you ever feel like, I mean, Kasra, you worked on Disney shows before under different guises, but this was your first time as a production designer on a Disney show, right? So, and Autumn, your first time as a cinematographer. I mean, did you ever have did the enormity of the machine ever feel like overwhelming at any point? There would be a lot more eyes on this than there would be normally on something you've done before.
Never felt like the machine, the machine was the pressure. It's just, maybe Kasra would agree, the pressure on myself to try and, you want to do a good job, and you want to serve the people that came before you. You there's a reference to these types of films, and no one wants to continue to repeat something that's been done before. You're as a filmmaker, you're always trying to like do something new and innovative with the people that you're surrounded, right? Because that makes such a difference in kind of what you end up doing. But no, I felt the pressure of time, maybe because these shows, like you say, that they're like films, but you have more page count, and it's 6 episodes, so, and you've got all these beautiful sets, right? So it's like you want to shoot all these cool shots, but like you really do have to kind of rein it in and be very specific, and your time is very limited. And scenes are added, like he says, they're writing as we go, so then you're getting new scenes, and Kasra's like pulling a ship scene out of his ass or something. Like all of a sudden there's this huge scene, I'm like, what are you gonna do here? And it happens, it just happens, but that's the kind of thing that we're dealing with. Or he's more so dealing with it as far as like, what is he gonna come up with quickly that serves our needs for shooting and VFX. But yeah, I just feel like time is the pressure on these things, and as it is with anything, like smaller films and indies and stuff. But you feel it more here because you have all the tools and you have such beautiful things to in front of you. It's not like a indie movie where you have the sun and a camera, so you can be quick. There's so many people on set, and it's a big there's just a lot of people, so it moves a bit slower. So that's really what I felt, at least. And he's kind of like me, where we're very, very particular, and we want everything the way that we want it, and we don't want to half-ass anything. And it's important to get things right and be specific, because all the time that's went in before it to design it, and all the construction people and all the art decorators and the set decorators and art directors. And so it's just one of those things where it's like, when I'm there shooting it, it's like, I don't want to I want to make everyone proud that put all that effort into it.
I think Autumn's being a bit modest, though, honestly, because no, seriously, because it's worth stressing one thing that she did say, which is that these are, while they're series, Having worked on three or four Marvel feature films before this, I can tell you that this series is every bit as technical and visually ambitious as every one of those features that I worked on. I'd say I'm not exaggerating when I say I think they're actually more visually intense than any of those features that we worked on. And Autumn and Kate and the shoot crew are shooting easily double sometimes 3 times as many pages as per day as those features have to shoot in their shoot schedule, with every bit of the same technical challenges, same amount of complex lighting and riggings, same degree of stunt work, visual effects set extension, special effects work, all these technical things that are time consuming, delay your setups that have to be accounted for. And Autumn is a big part of getting that day's work in the can, and so I think she's underrepresenting how hard that is, specifically on this project, because it has the ambition and in some ways the resources of a Marvel feature, but it's way more content and not proportionally more time. There's more time, but not proportionally more time. And that comes down to, Autumn and of course Kate and Richard Graves, our AD, and a lot of really other talented, smart people on set to figure that Jenga puzzle out. So.
Yeah, we have great crew though. He brings on great crew. I bring on great crew.
Yeah.
That's very important to my job, and as it is to him as well. So that makes us, able to be creative and do all these really cool things, is have people and execute things quickly and have the same taste level.
Yeah.
That I was going to ask you about that. I mean, I wonder, all this technical challenges that you faced that Kasra just mentioned, Autumn, and how much of that was new for you, and how much you rely on, on having a good crew. Kind of, I mean, for me, and I mean, I'm sure it's the same for all of us, but if you have a good crew and there's a certain, you can relax and be creative when you're being supported by a good crew. But how much of that, if, let's say, for example, you're, and Kasra, and this is something that might be going into the macro level for anyone that doesn't know how things work, but in terms of, keeping notes, on, if you're coming back to a set 3 weeks later or 3 months later, are you, from a lighting perspective, are you, making sure that your levels set are the same, your shooting stop is the same, that making sure that, every, from a set perspective, everything is put back in the right place. I mean, just, again, on a pure macro level, how do you stay on top of all that kind of stuff?
Can you hear that?
What is it?
Thunder.
Is it really?
Yeah. Thunder and lightning. So,
what's your apartment made of?
well, it's a house, so I'm fine, but it's
okay.
Loud. Yeah, no, I mean, my crew's everything. I mean, I've always been very ever since I came up in smaller films and indies, I've carried my crew with me as much as I could, meaning I have a lot of people that worked on Loki that I've worked with for years. They know my taste. Personally, I trust them. It's like they drive you, we butt heads, but they care so much, right? It's like they care because they want to do a good job, they're not, phoning it in. And so that makes me able to do my job. And on these, like Kasra was mentioning, it's like these are, on these big days and these big shows, you really do have a lot to get through, in one day and just as a whole. So crew's very important to me. And yeah, I'm just kind of loyal. That's kind of, how I am about people that I've worked with in the past. I tend to work with the same people. So on Loki, I was able to bring a lot of my crew to kind of round that answer up. It's just that, so pretty much everybody on my crew, except for a few locals I'd worked with before. and brought them from Los Angeles. It's very busy in Atlanta at the time, and I was able to bring people, and we had a fantastic line producer who Kasra and I worked well with, and they were also very supportive of us, and that was very nice. But yeah, and I loved his crew too, Kasra's crew, and I've worked with some of them afterwards, and I'm always just with them going like, oh, Kasra, he's so great. So his crew was great too. So it's like, it was a love fest with the crews. Sometimes I mean, you're like, what the fuck are we gonna do? And then stressful. Obviously that happens. Like I don't want to sound like him and I are never like saying like, what are we doing here? But it helps when you like the person, and if anything's negative, it's for the greater good, and at the end of the day, you're nice people, so that helps.
What was, do you guys have like a most fun memory? Would you say it's something that was the like one scene, or like was your favorite set, Kasra, or your favorite scene? And Autumn, same for you. Obviously I'm sure everything was great, but do you have a particular favorite thing that you look at, I was really proud of that specific thing more than anything, or I love that moment because of X, Y, and Z?
I mean, for me, there's a lot. I mean, there was a lot of moments I was really proud of what we all did together. But there were two that I guess stand out. One is the Time Theater, just because it was like our first stage set, and having it come to life with, like, it had been designed with this kind of concrete grid in the ceiling with these square apertures to create these kind of the squares of light, and like just seeing what Autumn and her team did to bring it to life, and even add this element of having these kind of columns of light move. That was very gratifying to see. And it was just early on, and we'd only been shooting locations, as is often the case. You start on location because you need a little bit more time to get the stage work going. And the locations were great, but like they're visually.
What did we start with?
We started with the TVA archives in the John Portman building, right, I think. And then we were at Roxcart. We had a few locations that were like cool, but we're just waiting to get into that first stage build. So that was exciting when we got into there. And then the other thing I remember is this awesome crane shot that Autumn did, this dolly out in the Ms. Minutes queue that was inspired with the ceiling of eyeballs is inspired by the Brewer building. And it's a lovely wide lens on a telescoping crane coming back, and the parallax on all those eyeballs in the ceiling, and Tom doing his magic. It was like just a really exciting shot. So those are the ones.
Awesome. What about you, Autumn?
Yeah. Well, as he was talking, I mean, all those things, and this kind of starts to go into production design or DP zone, where it's.
I'm all ears.
Well, it's like when I see the illustration, and then you kind of stop in on the builds, right? Because we're chasing the builds, right? And he has a crazy schedule, and like you said, we started at practical locations, so it gives them more time to get their build schedule, and he has tons of sets, and so we're busy shooting, so I don't always get to stop into these sets. But to meet someone who is as compulsive and obsessive as I am, that like the finishes, him and his finishes and his concrete, he's always calling me down to his office like, is this color, what do you think of this color, like this is a saturation, and architecture and design first, and I'm like, oh, this looks great, involving me and like just having me take a peek at it, and I'm like always like, this looks great, obviously your choices are great. And then I get on set, and it to have someone pay that much attention to detail, then I show up on set And sometimes we do a pre-light. A lot of times it was hard to do pre-lights for the schedule. We could, you know, obviously my crew's doing a pre-light, but like me there with camera and getting my time, not always the case. But every time I walked on one of these sets, like it was a great experience. Like I'd say the only time I was stressed out, and he knows this, is when I was outside and there was no set. And he tried really hard to give me some ground or some kind of undulating thing to like riff off of and put the camera low. You know, he's like, well, I'm trying to give you some berms and, you know, some reflective like dirt and, you know, so always thinking of me. But yeah, that's the only time. I mean, if there's a set there, I'm walking in and I'm stoked. So time theater, I really loved, because that was, like he said, was like, you know, just so amazing conceptually. And then when you're on the ground, it was amazing. But one thing I wanted to bring up, for he'll laugh at me, is there's a scene, Rock's Cart. I remember when we scouted it, I gave him such a hard time because it was like, what, like, how are we going to make this look good? It was like this empty kind of, imagine like a 1982 Target, but like stripped. There's nothing there. And I'm just like, we're so fucked. This is, I don't know. And, you know, giving him a hard time, like, what are we going to do? And then I show up and it actually ends up being like, I love that sequence so much. You know, we found a way to kind of work with the lighting above, and my crew was awesome and worked with his crew. And then he gave me, you know, foreground, and it just worked out. So it's nice to go to someone and be like, I'm stressed about something. And ultimately that's one of my favorite sequences, because that episode, I think episode 2, the hanger at the end, you know, the you know, and he's designing, thinking about the story, right? Because sometimes I go in there and I'm like, what can we do here? And I'm not always thinking about the story. And so then he's backing that up with, like, you know, giving us rows that we can turn around and shoot through and stuff. And we talked about like transparency and seeing, you know, through things and just a bunch of stuff. So I was very excited to walk into these sets and be happy, you know, not depressed. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. I'd love to know. I'd love to know about the all those practicals. Did you in the ceilings? Were, I know some of them were like probably like silver tip bulbs. You said, I think, but were any of them on the large scale that you were working in? Were any of them? Did you have to build or make any of them, or did you have to? You know, were they all? You know,
we painted every one of them. They were, all those silver tips were custom painted. Every
Are you serious?
One of them.
And I think your team custom frosted them, because I was talking to Brian and for this article, and he reminded me of like, like you guys were working with them on like making those exactly special so that everyone was getting what they wanted. And like to the point where the dome, right, the type of paint that you put on the dome, and
So no, that's exactly right. Basically, we played around with a lot of different levels of sheen on the inside of the dome surface to try to find the most even, basically, look. We're trying to avoid hot spots in there, and we were inevitably getting hot spots because the top of the silver tips was clear. So we ended up having the paint department paint like thousands, the top half, paint thousands of these bulbs, frost them all to diffuse that when they shine up there. And then we tinted some of the bowls dirtier, and then we worked with the fixtures crew on Autumn's team, who were in charge of the fixtures lighting, to like build in a degree of modulation. So if you look at them, there's like some bulbs that are dimmer than others and some that are dirtier and browner than others. So it's part of that. This is part of that thing we were talking about earlier about like what you get when you actually have a physical ceiling. You have an opportunity to bring this tactile, lived in kind of patina into the space that, you know, probably if that was a set extended ceiling, might not have gotten that degree of care. May have done, but it's tough because that, and I think Autumn and I have commiserated about this, that like, you know, we're just not involved with the post process very much, you know, like we're involved with it to the extent that we can inform it and plan for it during prep and production. But, you know, when camera wraps, we're done. So our ability to really control takes a significant nosedive basically right then. So yeah, so anyways, that's a small detail that I think contributes to what that place looks like, that if it had been set extended, we may not have had.
Yeah, that's the thing I was saying before. It's like you're walking into sets where they're full spaces to shoot. Like, you know, maybe the extension is like, I don't know, 200 feet down the way or something. Like Shrew was something I didn't bring up. Obviously that was a favorite, but again, like, you know, we shot that a bit later after COVID. So, you know, I'd been excited way before that, but that was exciting to like step on. And I was able to see him, you know, in his process there, because we'd take visits as they were building. But, you know, giving me as much full set as I can, you know, it's like, and the extension is somewhere that's not right in front of me, you know, it's off camera, right? You know, so it's like something that it might be blurry. It's not like, you know, I'm shooting a wall right there. And that's thoughtful, you know, it's like thinking about, okay, if I'm going to build, if I have to build blue screen in this, I'm gonna take as much money as I can, put it in front of the camera. And then maybe back there, you know, we'll talk to VFX and we'll deal with that, you know, corner down the way that's going to be in the way background. And she's also shooting anamorphic, so then that's not so horrible, you know. But yeah.
I mean, I'd love to get onto the discussion about post in a second. Just going back to the lighting scenario, when you're making those bulbs practical and you're spraying them and painting them all to, you know, Autumn, and this is a technical, I don't normally get into technical stuff too much, but you know, did you go in with a plan to have like a working stop throughout, or did you approach each scene differently? And then, you know, with all those as practical as if most of the time you're using that as your main source and you're just bringing something in here and there to kind of lift and model the actors, you know, how did that working with what was there affect those plans?
Yeah, I mean, I always shoot at I always shoot wide open if it's a certain lens that doesn't fall apart, you know, on me too much. And from, you know, Marvel show, you want to be kind to VFX and kind to everybody, you know, like you want to be able, you don't want it to get too messy, right? You know, there's a lot of thought going into the images, so you want them to resolve properly. But yeah, I always shoot it at like a 2.8 or less, you know, sometimes. So that's just me. And, you know, I have good crew, so I can do that. And yeah, I mean, it didn't really, yeah, I think the stop didn't really, that's something that I always shoot at. And obviously, you know, we did tests and Kasra's on board. Like you do tests just to be like, okay, these are our lenses and this is what it's going to look like. And this is the fall off factor. And is everyone okay with how this is looking? And, you know, obviously Blade Runner was a reference, and there's other films that, you know, kind of, you know, you're not coming out of the gate like surprise, you know, people kind of know your style. So, but also, you know, shooting at the stop and these lenses are beautiful when you have depth and you have practical sources that fall off and you have structure with architecture and stuff. So it's like a lot of the way that looks, and the stop is shining because it has those layers of depth in the set. And you know, he's always building practical, you know, there's a lot of mid-century units everywhere in the ceiling that I'm seeing that are kind of, you know, blooming and stuff. So but if that answers your question, I try to always shoot mostly wide open for the face.
Thank you. Yeah, it does. Yeah. So let's just get, if you're okay, I just want to talk about the post scenario. You brought it up, Kasra, and it was one of my questions. I mean, we kind of touched upon it a little bit at some point, but you know, we're not part of quite often we're not, you know, as I knew about cinematographers, but I didn't know about production designers. We're not part of the post process. So, you know, you work really hard up until a point and then you hand it off, and then it can become in danger of becoming something completely different. And, you know, I know there's always been, at least from a cinematographer point of view, a fight to try and stay on board and perhaps be paid, which doesn't always work out. You know, I think I remember you saying, Autumn, that Kasra, you made all these concept drawings of which you know, with the goal of passing them on to post and hoping that, you know, that kind of helps the, you know, the vision stay true all the way through. But, you know, I'd love to hear a little bit more if you guys feel, like there's something to say about that, and if you could stay on through post, would you, what would be the ideal scenario?
You want to go first?
Yeah, no, I'll let Kasra talk because I have an answer, but I'm actually curious what he's going to say because I think that production designers, especially on such big visual pieces like this, where there's a lot of concepts, drawings, and stuff that he's designing, that how can you not be there in post when you designed it? It's can get a little confusing, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it, definitely for a show like this, I think it's important. Obviously it varies from one project to the next, I guess, based on how much visual effects there are and what the nature of those visual effects are. But I do think that both for a production designer and for, in my opinion, cinematographer, it's like when you have like kind of significant visual spaces that are being constructed in post in a CG way, they still need to be designed and they still need to be lit, and the photography, virtual, albeit virtual, of those environments still has to be composed in terms of cinematography. So we do what we can in as the resources, time and money allow during the prep period and the production period to kind of anticipate what the questions will be in set extension when we're gone, and provide a brief, whether it's concept art from me or lighting references from Autumn, or previses that in storyboards that she works up. We do what we can in that period to prepare to have like a good and faithful execution, visual execution of those things that are going to happen in post while we're not there. But depending on the project, a significant amount of visual questions may need to be answered after camera wrap. And I think that it's sort of on a project by project basis. I think it would be beneficial to the project for production designers and cinematographers to continue to be involved in some way during that post process. I feel lucky on Loki because just being able to do what I did, which was create a pretty extensive package of conceptual imagery for what was going to be set extension, for what Lamentis looks like, what the arc and Shrew looks like, what the planet blowing up above Lamentis looks like, what the TVA expanse, that view out from the bridge, and what the statues in the TVA archives look like. All that stuff takes labor, takes a lot of art department labor to research and design and illustrate. And I was lucky to have that kind of labor in my budget on the show to be able to at least create that package and send it off. On a lot of shows, maybe most shows, I would say, you're not really resourced to do that. So I think we were in better shape than most. But yeah, I would say, I think it would be even better if we could have some degree of consultation as those things are being executed in the post period, because it relates directly to the look that we're helping to set up. So.
No, I was lucky I was around. Right. It wasn't that I was around, I think, because it was my first big project and I cared a lot about it. And then also, yeah, I mean, because Kasra wasn't there, I felt like, I just want to make sure that, our stuff is, kind of being looked after. And so making yourself available, whether you're getting paid or not, is important, even on smaller projects like, we're DPs, we just do DIs because we, if there is funds or if there isn't. But I was lucky enough to be in Atlanta for this post process, and Kate being obviously fine with me being involved in the producers and stuff. So, and then I would, text Kasra sometimes, and obviously production designers, like he's on other jobs and stuff. So sometimes he they just can't be available. But like, but no, I mean, everyone was very thoughtful about his design and stuff. And like he said, he did make these packages beforehand with that thought, that, you know, they would be referencing them in the future. So, but I agree. I think that should come about, and maybe it's something you put in your contract. You know, you, because of who you are and how you like to work, that you say, you know, I would love to take this job. It's very, you know, high visual effects job. You talk to the director and you say, you know, in post, I'd like to have maybe some 5 days when you're doing your VFX reviews to kind of just be there to just do a look-see. So it's up to us too, I think, to ask that. Maybe, you know, I think about that now, but I agree. Like, but yeah, I remember him doing just like references and illustrations for stuff that was going to be done after the fact too, because we want to know what's in the background. You know, it's like, you know, they actually didn't provide, you know, because of time, and we move so fast sometimes, and things are getting created before we're, or sorry, they're playing catch up, because things are being written later. And so, you know, maybe his illustration is all that my lighting team and I have to work off of. So we would put that up, knowing that, okay, so we don't have the plate yet, but we have this illustration. So it was helpful.
Yeah, and Autumn's right. The other way that we were really lucky on this, or I think, is that Kate, our director, was like super tenacious advocate for the look that Autumn and I established. So like the concept art and stuff, Kate fought really hard in post in our absence. She protected that design, and I think that, you know, again, that comes through in the final product. So yeah. And I don't think that's always the case. I think we were lucky. Another way we were lucky here.
Very much.
Yeah. It's a great idea. Great idea to kind of put that into our contracts. You know, whether, like you said, whether it's monetized or not, that we, you know, at least there's more, you know, there could be more cohesion on all kinds of projects going through. I mean, I haven't done too many films. I'm more of a commercial DP, but I've seen lots of bad green screens work. That, like, what were people thinking when they put that background without lighting? It's like, so like, head smacking moment. You know, just mute the camera for a second. I've got different thunder of my own, just different. Yeah. Can you hear that? Probably. I don't know if you've got any questions for yourself, but before I ask my next question, and if you haven't, I'll ask my next question.
Well, I was going to ask just one question. I mean, it's pretty simple, but I was thinking, because of our collaboration and just that went, you know, so great. When you're doing these illustrations, and you're thinking about these, like, that we're going to shoot, and you know, they're going to be lit, and from your experience, like, at what part of the process will you backtrack? Or maybe you've designed something and you're like, oh wait, you know, like, you know, do you backtrack and say, well, maybe that design's great, but let me think about the fact that it's going to be shot, and then you look at the scene and you're like, oh, maybe I should make it a bit bigger or taller because of this, or there's a fight sequence, and like, I already know you do this. I was just wanting you to answer what your process was, because you're very thoughtful of a DP, and as a production designer, you know, that I admire. I'm just wondering, like, what you do there, so other PDs can listen to this.
Sure. Well, thank you so much. I mean, I think that part of why I'm so focused on lighting, I think it's sort of one of the first things I think about in a design, is because I was an illustrator for a long time. And when you're making concept art, you know, you're making the kind of first image that a lot of people will look at, that is a kind of visual representation of what's on the script, what's written in the script, what a lot of people will look at and then react to. And like, so the concept art is like, it's wrong almost 100% of the time. You make an image, it's wrong almost 100% of the time, and you iterate it and it becomes less and less wrong. And by the end, it can be pretty close, but even then, by the time it goes through set design and set construction, the final piece of concept art may not be better than 70% accurate to what you build. But what I think is accurate from the piece of concept art usually is the way the set feels. And the way it feels is informed by the way it's lit and the atmospherics. So I feel like if you make a successful illustration, it's probably because it's lit well, you know, and or you know, has something that's working about it in terms of lighting, you know. And so I feel like that's part of the. I really do believe also generally that the production design is really lighting design. It's like a huge part of production design is lighting design. Because these are not restaurants or homes people live in. These are places that are their exclusive function is to be photographed. So like lighting design is a paramount part of production design, I think. So you start from there and work out, as opposed to like, I think a lot of people who come from different backgrounds, they might start with the palette, or they might start with the set dressing, and then they'll expand out from that, and then they'll back into lighting, which may be a perfectly fine way to go for some sets and some stories. But I think, at least for me, it starts with the light.
Actually, as he was talking, I was just going to say, that's such a great answer, is that one thing that I think, because I know him well, is that lighting can be so tied into character and emotional, just emotional response, emotional quality of the space. And I feel like I like to light, you know, and frame things for what the scene needs, or, you know, what you're bringing to the scene. Like maybe it's not necessarily like handheld, but you're doing it with the lighting, you know. You're making strong lighting choices that feel stark and, you know, scary, or romantic, or all these things. And I think in these designs, that makes sense what you're saying, because you have like the time theater, and, you know, it's so heavy in this brutalist architecture reference. And when you actually walk in these spaces as a person, you know, you go visit great architecture, it's so emotional, right? And it has to do with the lighting and where it comes from, and the bounced light and stuff. And so, and then the you know, Miss Minute's cue, it's like you've got all the eyeballs watching you, and it's very soft, but it feels eerie, and it's like all coming from the top. So all these things I think are so emotional. And that's what I like about lighting, is it can drive the emotion forward. So I feel as though, yeah, what you say kind of goes along with kind of how I like to work. And so it makes complete sense. And so, but I think I wanted to ask that question because I think if you're an up and coming young production designer, I think that's a cool answer and to think about, because it helps me, you know, as a DP so much. And I see these movies now, and you can see the collaboration between those two parties, and it works so much better when those departments are collaborating. You get better results. Yeah.
Well, that brings me to my question, my first question for you, which is, you kind of touched on it just now, actually, but I'd like to hear you talk more about what your thought process is on it. Is like the way you frame is so unique and so different than most cinematographers. Like the way you choose to cover things and where you put the camera, what lens you use. So when you're composing a frame, what are some of the, I know this is a very basic question, but like, what are some of the things that you're thinking about when you're composing a frame?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of what I said before. It's so emotional for me, you know. It's like, but when you're given a great space and you go into a great space that has great light, right? Like say you scout it and you can see that it will have great light in the future, and it's an existing house. Or, you know, you show me the concept art and I'm like, oh, you're already driving that. And I'm like, oh, I can sense that a great wide shots from here. I'm already getting backlight and depth, you know. But yet, where does the light come from? Where's the depth? Where's the angle of depth? And just kind of foreground, midground, and background, really. But also staying true to kind of my OCD with like kind of keeping everything center punched and symmetrical, and the rule of thirds, that's just kind of my taste, that it's hard to break me from that. So my operators kind of get on my case, but it really is about walking into a good space, because there are a lot of spaces that are hard to find wide shots, but you can find one, but when someone's designing something with that in mind, like a good wide shot, that's helpful. But yeah, if it doesn't feel right, then I'll scrap it, because so many times, like, I put the camera somewhere, or you put it on a shoulder and you're like, that doesn't feel right, and emotionally you're just, if I'm operating, you can sense that as an operator, that it's not feeling right. Then you put on the dolly and you do something on track. But I'm used to operating myself. So Loki was the second time in my career that I didn't operate a camera, and it was hard. But if you find someone with the sensibility close to yours, then you can kind of, you get taken care of very well. But yeah, it's very emotional. Like, you just feel it. Like, if it feels wrong.
Sure.
But it has to do with kind of space and depth and light, where the light's coming from.
Let me lead on from that, actually, just before we change subjects. How if you go into a project, and maybe this one specifically, are you looking at the character, and are you trying to tell a story arc within the lighting and the camera operating, like the framing, or are you just letting the scene, you're taking each scene, as it comes, within itself? So let's say, for example, like Loki's character from the episode 1 to episode 6, changes, even though there is a bit of a shift where he has that moment of realization. Is there an element of story arc reflected in the lighting to help his journey, or the camera framing, or is that just, are you, like I said, or is that not represented like that? Are you just responding to the emotional impact of each scene specifically?
I think with this, I mean, in the past, you on smaller stuff, like, yeah, I mean, maybe sometimes you're winging it, but not with this. I mean, so much came before me, like, it's on the page, right? And in his designs, I mean, you look at the color arc with these episodes, and they're very bold, and we talked a lot about color in our meetings, and and the emotional quality of that came up, as far as like their relationship and being romantic, and then even to Timekeepers. Is it Timekeepers? What's the one that I like, Kasra, that's like all top? The big fight that I like with the soft top light and the Timekeepers on the wall.
Oh yeah, the Timekeeper's chamber. Yeah.
Chamber.
Yeah.
And we did testing for those colors and stuff. And yeah, I mean, obviously the colors are thoughtful, and it crescendos into something that has a mixed color palette that's moving, which goes along to, what is it? Alternate universe. What am I thinking of, Cass?
The multiverse. Yeah, the multiverse. Yeah.
And the timeline and stuff. But yeah, I think this has the opportunity, and on the page there was a lot of opportunity for color shifts and exploration of color. And Kaz was doing that with Kate, because they would come up with stuff, and then in their conceptual meetings, and then I would be brought in, and we would do testing and stuff. But yeah, I feel like I don't necessarily think that it was all set out for us. Like, I didn't feel like that. Like, this is, we're going to move from one color to the next color to the next color, at least for in my department. But it was a conversation and exploration, and it was very thoughtful. Like, colors were chosen for a reason. And yeah, I think Kate and Kasra were like coming up with these ideas, and then we'd have meetings about which one worked and stuff like that.
Right? And I think that it's also, I think sort of what you're, correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe what I think you're asking about, Matthew, is like, did the lighting correlate to the emotional progression? And I think it did, in my opinion, but it's less so about like tracking one character and more about like the episodes. They obviously intensify, right? The stakes intensify. So even if Autumn and I never specifically had a conversation with ourselves or Kate about like the palettes or the lighting intensifying as the show progressed. It sort of happens based on an individual episode by episode basis, and then within each episode they obviously intensify as you move towards the end. So like that sort of happens. I think the narrative, a well-written narrative, prescribes that kind of effect to the visuals, sort of.
Must be interesting for you if you've done mostly movies and going to a TV show and you get the opportunity to make that progression across each episode as you would perhaps within the period of an hour. Is that more fun, more freeing, or is it just a different experience for both of you?
It's fun.
It's fun. It's fun. I mean, it was fun also because we just had a lot of variety. It's also why it was hard, but because it was like 6 Marvel movies. So it was fun, but hard because of that.
You had no gray beard before the beginning of the series.
Yeah, exactly. Totally. This is all fake. Yeah, exactly.
I remember.
Same here.
Yeah,
Same here.
totally.
This was not gray.
No, this is a Zoom filter. This is not.
Everyone's always trying to make themselves look better. We're trying to make ourselves look older.
Right.
I'm conscious of time. I want to wrap things up soon, but I kind of saved these kind of questions towards the end, unless again you had any more questions for each other. But how long was the show, was the filming and the prep combined, would you say? That's just a lead into my next question.
I just had to answer this, but I forgot to write it down, so I was hoping you had it.
I mean, I don't remember how many days we shot. I know that prep started
80 something. We shot 80 something.
80 something days.
Not including reshoots, I don't think. Or is it 60 something? Maybe it's 60.
I mean, I think I started my prep, like I remember the day because it was my dad's birthday. It was September 5th, 2019. And we wrapped in beginning of December. And then we went back for a month of reshoots in January. So we wrapped in December of 2020. And then we went back for a month of reshoots in January 2021. Now, keep in mind that 6 months of that time we were shut for COVID, working to a degree. We were all working to a degree, having meetings and things, but.
We finished in December?
I think we finished early December. Am I wrong? No, I think that's right.
Because we did reshoots in February, I know that.
Oh, it was February's reshoots, not
Reshoots,
January. Yeah. And it was actually, I say a month of reshoots. It was a month of prep. It was only a few days of photography, of reshoot photography. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay. I mean, it's a fair amount of time. I mean, so the reason I ask, we've discussed this on previous film roundtables, but the impact of that time on your personal lives. So, and I'll ask you both separately, but Kasra, I believe your wife was pregnant during prep, and you had your baby during the production, and I'm interested to know what kind of toll that I have two kids, 5-year-old and a 7-year-old, and it's hard enough in the commercial world, and I have dipped my toe a little bit into television, and I know how hard it is. Very topical conversation right now, of course, but and then you, Autumn, being a working DP, and your partner being a working DP, and you have a 5-year-old, I believe, right? So I mean, when you're both sucked into these worlds for so long, how does it impact your lives personally? Because again, this is something that people don't really think about when they're starting out their careers.
No, it's true.
I'll let Cass go first.
It's hard. It's very hard. My wife came with me to Atlanta. She was pregnant when I got this job. So we kind of we planned for that. But yeah, it's really tricky. I mean, it's not ideal circumstances to have your first child across the country from your family the third week of shooting or something, which is what happened. And then it's certainly not ideal with what followed that last year specifically, which is that, my daughter was born and I took a week off of work to spend that with my daughter and my wife. And then I went back to work for a week, and then the pandemic happened and we shut down. So, being away and then also having the world shut down and having a newborn, because nobody knew what to do, we just stayed there. So we ended up in Atlanta, even though we weren't going to work physically, and it didn't have to be in Atlanta, just because of circumstances and not wanting to travel with a newborn in the middle of all of that. So yeah, it's definitely one of the challenges of this job, and it's increasingly the case since I've been in this business about 20 years, is that one of the costs is that you're on the road. And so the answer is, what toll did it take? I don't know. But my wife couldn't work. My wife's a working professional with a career. She's worked quite hard to get. She does a very hugely important job. She's speech pathologist, works with people who are surviving stroke and dealing with dementia. And yeah, so she was basically had to put that on hold to come to Atlanta for me to do this. And yeah, so in terms of going forward, like, we're just figuring it out one project at a time. We don't know exactly how it's going to work. This past year I was at home, she went back to work, and I took some jobs here. I passed on a few jobs, and next year is a different story again. So it basically becomes one of the more significant things, variables in organizing your lives together. It's just part of this business.
Yeah, it's not easy. Yeah, I mean, my situation is difficult because we do the same thing, and as a DP, you get it, Matthew, and Kasra does too, but not all the jobs that you and your partner want to take are going to be at the same time, right? I'm sorry, like in the right time frame, like to do the back and forth, like, okay, this is your turn, this is my turn, and that would be ideal, right? Where you'd be thoughtful enough to be like, okay, let's support each other in that way, where it'd be your turn and my turn, because then someone can be there for your child when the other person's working. But because Adam's constantly getting offered very interesting projects, he has ended up being very supportive of my career, and then watching Aiden while I do my projects, and so on and so forth. But recently, I did Loki, and then something directly after, so we've had to have family come help us, and my parents play a huge role in helping us watch our son while we have jobs at the same time, because we're working at the same time now. So you as he said, it's like it's case by case. Every year is different, and you just have to be supportive, and it's not perfect. And most importantly, just be there for your children as much as you can be, whether that's on FaceTime or making sure the people that they're with are enriching their lives, and that you can visit them as much as possible and check in. And that's really what it's about. It's, at some point when you decide to have a partner that's working partner and isn't home and can't be home all the time watching your child, you have to share that passion for what you do, and be supportive. So it's really, yeah, like he said, it's like every year you just kind of get thrown a big, explosion, and you're just trying, like, piece yourself and your family together to make it work. Yeah, I really don't know how to answer it, because in this whole strike thing, not to get into that, but it really is important. I mean, I was thinking about it in all these stories, you know, people are like working and they don't get to see their families. I mean, with regulations, it would play such a huge role in certain people being able to maybe tuck their kids in bed at night, or to prevent arguments, or, you know, just a plethora of, you know, things that will keep families together and keep people healthy and sane. So these small choices that we make to structure our working hours, and it helps keep our family lives with some, just to help ease the burden of that kind of heartache that everyone around us feels when they're working for someone who's on set 13 to 16 hours a day. So
yeah, that's very well said. That's exactly right. It's a very relevant question at this moment, Matthew.
Yeah. So I hope I hope small, baby steps, but I do hope that some small resolutions come to play, because it just saves, people's lives that we don't think about every day, and it's important to everybody, our crew, people that work for us and have a lot going on that we don't get to talk to them about because we're too busy working 16 hours, and we're so stressed that we don't even stop to think like, are you good? Are you and your wife good? Have you seen your son in 5 years? It's like, oh, wait, you haven't seen your son in 5 years? Oh,
Yeah.
We take it so much for granted, so much. I mean, from an outside perspective, people who are not familiar with the filmmaking process, they just see, and I'm sure this has been discussed ad nauseum, but the glamour and the glitz and the excitement, especially for you guys working on, on a Disney show, it probably doesn't get much bigger than that and much cooler, the pinnacle of, the size and scope of production. But on the other end, it's like exactly what you guys just said. It's, what's the cost? And, we all have such passion for what we do, and we want to give it our all to the detriment of ourselves and those around us on some level. And if there were these regulations to kind of remind us, oh yeah, we do every now and again. We have lives, outside of our work life, then a lot of relationships will be saved and bettered. So fingers crossed there. Do you guys have any parting questions or parting thoughts you want to, before we wrap it up?
I will just say that it was a joy to work with Autumn on this, and we have. It would be remiss not to mention that we had honestly just a kind of an exceptionally talented and nice group of people to work with in terms of the other department heads and the production people that we're working with, Kate, Kevin, Michelle, and Christine, our costumes, and all these people are just I think we got lucky with finding a project that had these particular collaborators who are creatively and personally in sync with us. And I'm grateful for the experience, and I fully expect it may be a while before I can have another experience that's quite like it. So,
yeah. Well said. I concur. Yeah, it was very, very unique, and I'm happy that for me and him too, it was like our first kind of showcase of kind of our work. Like, it was my longest project thus far, and where you can exercise your creativity. So yeah, and I wanted, I like doing these talks. I've only done one other one with Great Friend, and then doing this one with Kasra, but I was just excited to do it because I really do whenever I have a project, production designer is so important to me, and it usually ends up being someone who I'm super good friends with. And it's just so rewarding because it is such a hard job and long hours, and it's so creative, but to be able to work with people that you admire and have similar taste, and that kind of drive you to make great images. I mean, you can't ask for more. So I hope that people watching that are younger and coming up look for those opportunities. And a lot of DP friends that I have, you're recommending production designers a lot, and it's same for a production designer on the other side of it. So it's you have choices in your career to choose people to work with. And so I look forward to working with him again and just
Likewise.
like saying like, watch out, like it'll be something cool for sure.
Totally.
You know, I was going to say, you guys are probably spoiled now. You know, it's going to be hard to kind of replicate.
No,
that.
trust me. Yeah. I'm like,
Yeah, for sure.
You know, it's one of the things that, you know, that we try to stress on our roundtables, the film roundtable, is the sense of community and teamwork and how important the team is to the success of any project. And it's great to hear you guys both, you know, kind of, you know, really support that message. And, you know, obviously the proof's in the pudding right here with you two, both, you know, fantastically talented people. But, you know, alone, you would have done a great job, but together you've done an amazing job. So
yeah,
that's great.
I think that's right.
Well, I want to thank you both for your time
Thank
today.
you. Thank
Really
you. It was
enjoyed
fun.
it.
Yeah, it was a fun chat. Thank you very much for asking us.
thanks, guys.
It was great. Look forward to chatting more with you guys on another great project that you'll have done together or singularly, separately. But before we sign off, I just want to thank a quick shout out to the rest of the Film Roundtable team: Aaron Weil, Doug Torres, Maria Prieto, and Jimena Prieto. Thank you everyone for listening and for your continued support for these roundtables and the platform. And please follow us on Instagram and at Film Roundtable, and subscribe to our podcast and our YouTube page, and get updates, upcoming talks for many more fascinating ones like this one. And thanks a lot, guys, and good luck with your careers, and look forward to watching you continue to shine and do great work.
Thanks, Matthew.
Talk to you soon.
Cheers. Take care.
Bye.